Okay. So this is about introducing quickest valuable releases. Now I'm doing this as a Amplo community practice session, so there's going to be a little bit more background than I might give in, or than I would give in a ACE session. Um, and this is, we're still working on it, but this is going to be one of the new graphics of Amplo because this is really the 6 parts of it. There's what to build, how to get started, improving workflows, the employee learning kata, workflow management, and the transition management. And it's based on flow, lean theory constraints with human-centered development. I call this the employee system and its value by design. I think this is a very important thing to realize. That's the thing we talk about with the Penta. We can actually create or design so we break the iron triangle, and people are still attached to the triangle. There's still a lot of people when I put it up there say, oh, well, it's inherent, yeah, that you can do this sometimes, but it's always the way to think about it. So anyway, this is me, you know it, but again, for the purpose of the recording. So I wasn't at the original Agile Manifesto, but I was brought back for the 10th year anniversary because I'd had an impact on XP and Scrum before, and then I had actually co-formed Lean Kanban University with David Anderson, so I was pretty well known. It's funny, I don't think people really know how into things I was because it was so long ago. And as vocal as I've been on some things, not a variety of others. I know I knew SAFe well. I mean, I was an XP, I mean, I was a gold
Well,
partner at SBCT. I know it's changed a bit, but it's still okay. So I bring in a lot of these things. This is the Employee Learning Code, of course, is the rewrite of the Being an Effective Value Coach to put more things. And as I mentioned, the employee system is going to be an extension of the employee development system where it'll have team and scale in it. These are just other books I've written, some of them technical, some not. Um, okay, so well, this is, oh, somehow this got in the wrong order. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. Um, okay, well, sorry about that. I got this. I must have accidentally moved one of the slides. Okay, so this is the agenda. We're going to talk about what Amplio is, not as really teaching Amplio, but it's important where I'm coming from in this whole talk, okay? There are a few core principles of Amplio we use that you have to recognize is why the QVR is so useful. We're going to look at why QVRs are needed. What are they and the benefit of QVR. So there's this need of improvement. I'm just going to kind of talk about this background. Agile originated with mostly a focus on the team. Product management focuses on customers and stories, but it's expanded, okay? And a holistic focus is needed. And people have forgotten that when we cross the chasm, this picture comes from Jeffrey Moore. He didn't talk about he wasn't the first one to talk about the crossing the chasm, but he kind of popularized it. We got to recognize what worked here does not really work here for 2 reasons. The problems are different and the way people learn is different. So QVRs might not have been necessary, probably weren't necessary 20 years ago. They would have been useful. And in fact, the heritage of the QVRs, we get into it, happened around 2004 or 5, I think. And I'll talk about that. So this is the most important concept in net objectives when we use it for 15 years consulting. This was the thing that drove most everything we did. And yet it's something I rarely see in the space. It's not in Scrum. It's not in Kanban. It's not in Safe. It's in Steve Tendon's Tame Flow. He talks about it as a move, but it's not quite the same as what I have here. So this is a very critical missing piece. So I want to get this whole idea. So what is Amplio? You want to look at this so you can understand how we would use QVR. So it's an integration of the theories of flow, lean, theory constraints, and human-centered development. But I've also incorporated the practices of Evo. That's Tom Gilb's competitive engineering is where he's written it up. This goes back he wrote the book maybe in the 80s, but his work goes back to the 70s. And his work in the 70s and 80s was way advanced beyond what Agile is today. This tends to happen because people who create things tend to fall in love with their creations, and Agile has done that at big scale. But because I use a combination of theory and practice, if we look at their advantages to framework, quick start, predefined practices, can find people who know it. On your own, you get a tailored approach, but you have to reinvent a lot. Amplio has designed itself to take advantage of these. This is important. It's this blend of theory and practice, principles and practices. And the reason I'm saying this is not a sales pitch for Amplio, or well, maybe it is, but that's not the reason I'm saying it. The reason I'm saying it is because the QVR is a concept. It's an approach. It doesn't mean you can't change it. It's intended to be changed. It's looking at more from an objectives point of view. The disadvantages of frameworks are many. Solution without a diagnosis. It's typically not fit for purpose nowadays, as I showed in Crossing the Chasm. It's not on the leading edge. I've been 10 years ahead of Scrum in general or more. And by that, I mean, I said something, was chastised for saying it, then 10 years later, they said it. It's usually been more like about 12 years. You know, it's purposefully incomplete, often myopic. You tend to look at things. It's gotten to be certification bound, so it's very expensive and ignores the people aspect of learning, which to me is the biggest irony in the Agile space. It's about people, but how you can adjust to people's needs is ignored. Scrum is a jump in, Safe has a few adjustments, not effective. On your own, you're likely to miss things you've got to reinvent. Now, Amplio does have a disadvantage. There are not that many sources for training, namely, you're looking at them. And I know that's a disadvantage, but that's about it. Why can I say that? Because when I find these, I see how people get around them and I incorporate it into Amplio because it's designed to be extended. This was a big breakthrough for me around, I think it was around 2012, 2013. Up to that point, I was real happy with Lean. I pretty much thought I could do everything I wanted to in Lean. And then one of my guys introduced me to David Marquet and his Turn the Ship Around. And what I realized was the management philosophy of Turn the Ship Around was not in Lean. It was a new kind of management philosophy I'd never seen. Oh my goodness. There is no one encompassing school. I was just happy, so happy with having done Lean for 10 years that it was like I got a little over passionate. But then I started looking. I said, well, what's out there? So it's been well over a decade since I've been looking to include things. And that's why we have this big list up here. I could go on, but that's it. Okay. So I want to look at a few core principles that are going to guide us. Okay. And this comes from Ellie Goldratt and The Choice. This is a fabulous book. It's one of my top 3 books to read, probably one of my top 2 books to read. If we dive deep enough, we'll find there are very few elements at the base, the root causes, which through cause and effect connections are governing the whole system. He calls this inherent simplicity. It's at the foundation of all modern science. Nature is exceedingly simple and harmonious with itself. Now, he doesn't mean you could see everything and all that, but it means that you can see a lot and you could use that to determine what's going on or to determine what you don't see. This is a very proactive stance that I don't see in the common Agile space. I'm not even sure I see it in Kanban, but it is in Lean. So I want to just quickly mention these 6. In Amplio, we use 10, and then we have other factors for effective value streams, but these 6 will come up repeatedly during this talk. We want to remove delays. And multitasking causes delays, and delays cause waste. And when you work beyond capacity, that causes delay. So delay, delay, delay. You know, it's kind of like one of my favorite movies is No Reservations. And the woman asked the other chef, what's the secret of French cooking? And he says, butter, butter, and butter. What's the secret of Amplio? Eliminate delays, eliminate delays, eliminate delays. All kinds of delays, feedback, value, whatever. Virtually everything comes from this. It causes all sorts of problems. Working on things of lesser value is waste. You can even say delays would fix that if you get quick feedback about what you're working on. And this is kind of obvious, but it needs to be taken advantage. Smaller is typically faster. Okay. And we only see what we think and talk about. This is the second cornerstone. People don't, if they're not talking about something, they're not seeing it. It's just human nature. So we'll keep this in the background. I'm going to talk about them. That may be more for a reference later. Okay, so why are QVRs necessary? Well, we've got all this stuff. There's no agreement on what's important. There's too much work in process. There's lack of alignment. Many things of lesser value are delivered. Things that you build but aren't used, as an example, things you build that maybe they're used but not much. Isn't a good focus on the overall objective. Feature factories. What are some others y'all have seen? Does this capture most of them, though? These are the ones I just seem to hear all the time. No, we can't sequence. Oh, we can't get buy-in. We can't do this.
I guess it's related to sequence now, but specifically handoffs.
Yeah, that I would say, yeah, that would be lack of alignment that you have to hand off. But actually, that's true. Oh, in fact, maybe that's something I even left out now that I think about it. So let me just quickly correct this or add this. Um, yeah, and I may not cover how QVRs handle that, but they do. That'll be next week for sure. Though I'll talk about it. So I'll just add that in there. That's good because QVRs can be used to align teams, not just alignment, but can be used to help guide the structure of your organization. So that's where I think this is not where I hadn't covered this. Okay. So what are QVRs? It's the quickest valuable release. Okay. It's the smallest set of work, can be delivered quickly, fully prepared for stakeholder consumption, and provides meaningful, validated value. Now, of course, you have to validate it again, but I mean, when you're building it, you shouldn't wonder if it's going to be of value or not. You should know. Truth is, most people don't. And some people say, oh, since I don't know and I haven't figured it out, it mustn't be possible. Well, it's just BS. There are ways. Jobs to be Done is one way by Tony Ulwick. It's something I did in the 80s and 90s when I used to build a lot of software. I can remember sometimes building a feature that nobody wanted, but that was usually because I had this really cool idea and I didn't ask anybody. Oh, I know they'll love it. And often they did, more often they didn't. But when I watched how they worked, I was very clear what they needed, not necessarily how to implement it. So it's not a reason to do less, but a reason to deliver sooner by creating focus and alignment while reducing waste. Okay, that should be do less. Its heritage is the minimum marketable feature of software by numbers. By the way, software by numbers, as it's discussed in SAFe, has absolutely nothing to do with software by numbers in the book, even though they reference the book. The concept they have the same name, but it has nothing, the way they describe it and what it does, it has nothing to do with anything. Same, by the way, for the Lean UX, which they pull out of. They use Lean UX and MMF. They change what both of them are and then refer back to the book to sound cool. It's pretty upsetting because it misrepresents two brilliant books. Okay. Now we changed at Net Objectives MMFs to MBIs after a while. We used MMFs for a while, but we found we were not able to convey to IT because they didn't have features like marketing. They didn't market features. So when we used MMF, it was a disconnect for them. I even remember losing a client because of the name MMF. They kept saying, "Oh, we're not a product company. We don't have features. We're just supporting IT." And I could have maybe done better and said, "Well, they have features, so what you're supporting is enabling them to market it." But I didn't think fast enough. But it's actually not accurate because it's not the feature itself that you're building. It might enable a feature. Feature might be something that a salesperson uses or a support person uses. So we changed it to minimum business increment, and then we changed it to minimum value increment because Tom Gill pointed out, what about governments? It works for governments. Why? But business people, again, people would not relate to it. And finally, we changed it to quickest valuable releases, because that was intentionally revealing, and it can include now the idea of MVPs, which are about checking your assumptions, and MVIs, which we now repurpose to mean something that is value but not releasable in case you got a really, really long project. So this is basically what the MVI, oh, it's just a typo, it shouldn't be there. Okay. So the benefits, we want to lower the amount of waste created. We want to avoid working on items of less importance. We want to speed up delivery. It can increase alignment, lowering the overhead of coordination, expand the cost of customers to all critical stakeholders. Okay. So I'm going to pause at this point. Any questions, or you get the sense there's a need and there's this proactive approach to it all. Okay. So I looked at the aspects of the quickest value release. Here is the definition I used. Okay, this is the key piece I got from Tom Gill. You got to look at the success criteria constraints, the critical stakeholders along with their values. Everything is done within that context. Well, what do I mean by stakeholder value? So you could read ahead if you want to, but I'm going to go through each one of these. I'm going to give first a quick cut on all of them, and then I'll go back through each one in detail. So value is defined by the value success criteria and constraints of critical stakeholders. I'll talk more about what they are. We want to state things in terms of objectives, because then we could change the solution. We can change the way we get there. It's got to be consumable. We don't want shelfware, as we used to call it. I guess now we could call it serverware. It's only on the server, but nobody's used it. It's got to be quick. It's not about doing less. It's realizing value sooner. It's got to be small. But it has to be big enough at the same time to deliver value. We need visibility and focus on it. If you don't have a vernacular for it, you're not going to get that. So we have to provide that. It's silly that we have to. Well, the fact that we have to is not silly. That's the law of people listening and seeing. The fact that it isn't available anywhere that I can find in the popular Agile frameworks is kind of a travesty. Faster feedback means less waste. We want to be able to sequence our work because everything's important. For RDAs, doesn't work. We want to align teams. We want to create the context for features and stories so we don't overbuild. Improve iteration efficiency. These are what Scrum calls these sprints. And improve PI planning. I don't care whether you're doing safe. I could say big room planning, but I'm going to call it program increment planning because they're the ones who invented the concept. Well, they're the ones who popularized the concept. Okay, so let's go through each one of these. So since I'm talking about stakeholders, let's make sure we know what I'm talking about. There's sponsoring stakeholders. These are people who sponsor it. They pay for it. These could be executives. They could be sponsoring customers. Sometimes the customer says, you do this, I'll pay for it. Who's paying the money? I'm talking about who's paying the money to build it, not who's paying the money after you've built it. Who is paying the money for it? Okay, that's sponsoring stakeholders. Consuming stakeholders, they may pay, but they pay after you built it. Okay, so it's not like they don't pay money. Some consuming stakeholders don't pay anything, by the way. Okay, then there's constraining stakeholders. Could be a government agency. If you've got to file what you've done with a company, if you're like SOX compliance, if you're generating reports for that, that's a constraining stakeholders. If you've got a system you're using that needs certain security, that would be a constraining stakeholders. And then I'm going to use the term stewarding. I had been using the word development, but those that create, maintain, and support the system is what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm just going to call it stewarding because it's really the meaning. We define value in terms of the value success criteria and the constraints of these people. Now, I'm not going to talk about how we do it, but it's pretty clear we should do it. Okay, what about objectives? Or is this okay? I should have paused for questions. Okay, or at least give you a breath.
Stewarding. Can you explain stewarding?
I'm sorry?
Stewarding.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand the word you're saying.
The steward, the stakeholders. Can you explain that? Stewarding or what?
I can somebody explain what he's
A
saying?
steward, Al.
Oh, steward. Sorry. So a steward is somebody who oversees things. Um, they may be involved in the creation of it. They may be maintaining it, like museums. Typically, think of a shepherd. Stewarding is like shepherding. You're tracking and seeing how things are. So, in a sense, if you're part of creating, maintaining, or supporting the QVR, you're helping both create and maintain it. So it's that whole encompassing. Because when you have a
Yeah,
product, you
but
can just build it
that
in.
terminology can be confusing. That terminology can be confusing in a broader sense as defining a stakeholder. I'm not. That's what I think.
Well, if you're the here's why. Okay, I got the confusion is why do I have stewarding as a stakeholder? Is that what that's what's
Uh,
confusing? Okay, no, that's good
Yeah.
because we actually this is a good question and thanks for asking. We actually originally I had three, but then I realized think about the people who create it, maintain it, and support it. Shouldn't, when you build a system, keep them in mind? How are you going to continue to improve it? How are you going to continue to maintain it? How are you going to continue to support it? So that's why they're also stakeholders. The people who build it and maintain it and support it are stakeholders because we want to consider how they're going to keep it going for these three groups. So we don't want to make it,
Okay.
oh, I can build it, and then the maintenance people, I don't care about them. So it's a very good question. Sorry, I misunderstood what you're asking. Yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, so we need objectives. Now, this is something that I actually learned the equivalent of this by Fernando Flores in the 80s. But Tony Ulwick's the only guy I know who's written it up. Now, I have not written it up. We've had a few sessions in Amplio University on it, but it's basically instead of going out and looking for wants and needs, which are notoriously insufficient, but people still do it. I mean, this is something that's been going on for decades. People know it doesn't work well, but we don't know what else to do, so we think it's the best. Well, it's the best you know. It's not the best how, because this guy wrote this up a long time ago, and I've been doing this for a long time too, and I may or may not write it up because he does a very good job. He explains wants and needs. Customers are very focused on their work, and they'll tell you how to solve the problem in front of them. They may not know they shouldn't be having the problem in front of them. Of course, developers don't tend to do that second order learning either. But what we want to do is what are the objectives? Why are we doing this in the first place? Okay. Now we have this outcomes over outputs is already. It's a principle emphasizing delivering real world impact rather than just producing deliverables. So that's good. The outcome is this is what you're able to do. The output is what you're able to do. The outcome is the benefit of it. But why are you doing that? A common example of outcomes over outputs is people don't want drills, they want holes in the wall. Well, they don't, the holes in the wall gives them the benefit of being able to hang pictures. But why are they wanting to hang pictures? Well, it could be they just want to decorate their wall. It could be they want to make the wall have a montage of pictures of their family and they want to create a family space. But maybe if they want to just decorate and make the hallway pretty instead of pictures, maybe faux painting is better. So holes in the walls might be outputs, hanging pictures might be outcomes, but I'm saying let's look at the objective. Why are we doing this on the wall in the first place? This is based on, it's not based on, it's consistent with design thinking, but I kind of like it better because it's easier to comprehend. It gets you directly looking at what the customer is looking at and doing, and I think is quite useful that way. Okay. So it's objectives over outcomes means to look at why we want that input. We need to go deeper than benefits. This is what I'm saying. This enables multiple approaches. Now, there's something that we'll talk about next week. The next one is I'm going to lay this whole thing out, requirements by objectives. But see, particular solutions, we have less certainty of what outcomes, we have less certainty of the outputs we need at the beginning and a little more certainty of the outcomes, but we have even more certainty of the objectives. See, this is something that's been missed. The objectives of something you're building should be known up front. How to actually create the particular features or stories you need to discover, that the objectives should be there. Now, I'm not going to talk about this too much, but somebody wrote a whole book on it. I can never say his last name, so I'll just say his first name. Bent's his first name, how big things get done. And he gives story after story after story about how when you lose sight of the objectives, you start doing all sorts of stuff that's very ineffective and very efficient. But when you have the objectives, you can march toward it, figuring out your problems as you go. Now, even when you have a new product, I would say this is true. The lean startup is very clear that MVPs, and I'm going to use the term MVP from Eric Ries, not from the original source, Frank Robinson, 20 plus years ago. His MVP was kind of like the software by numbers MMF, but Eric Ries's MVP is to see if you have a market. Now, the importance here is when you have a new product, and he talks about the GE engine was one of the case studies. They were very, 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 very clear about the objective of their new engine. The assumptions was, would people want it? Would it be supportable? How would it have to affect General Electric to get that engine out? So there were a lot of assumptions, but the objective of the engine was quite clear. So there, what you're doing is you still know the objective and you want to either validate or invalidate the objective. And sometimes you will say, oh, well, this objective was wrong, so let's go away. There's not a market. But you should have clarity on what you're doing. And the fact that so many people don't is because they're not looking at the customer to see how they work. We have more flexibility as we will learn. Okay, questions on this. This is a big thing. And I'll show a slide on this as I go further, but does that sound reasonable, what I said? Are there questions? Oh, I got the next slide. It's right here. We do this. We want to look at what we have. So this might make it a little clearer. Adding resources. In other words, this heading is maybe a little misleading. I took this from another slide. I just realized that, another presentation. There was this question of what happens when things change. So maybe you get more resources. Well, that's usually not a good idea. So I'm not going to deal with that. I'm going to look at, we want to shift from outputs outcomes to meeting objectives. So this is like scope, the specified set of stakeholder and system functions, what we're planning to build. Not always well known up front. I agree with this. Outcomes, how it functions. And the objectives are the results we want to achieve. It's the why. This should be known up front. So everybody's dealing with this. They're now starting to deal with this. And I'm saying you really want to deal with this. And then you come up with these after you deal with this. QVRs are about objectives, not about these details. Okay, now I'm wanting to take questions. This is a shift. This is actually a big shift. This is the shift left, as some people would call it, is another way of shifting left. Okay, consumable. There's no value until it's consumed by the stakeholders. I actually came across a company that built software, but they forgot to, they neglected to tell the salespeople they had built the software, so nobody was selling it. More often, customers never have an idea about the feature. You see this in Office. I mean, the software, I see this in applications I use all the time. They make it change, but they don't tell anybody about it. And what it looks like is a feature went away. The way they do animation in PowerPoint for, I don't know, months, I thought they took away a feature I used all the time. And then I noticed there was another way to get it that used to not be there, but they never told me. So it took me months to figure it out. I under my breath said, why did they take that away? It was so nice. They didn't. They moved it. That's not consumable when you bury a new function. Okay. Delivery alone means little. Completion alone means less. In other words, if you complete it, but it's not on your servers, that's no good. You get a little bit because you can get internal feedback. You've got to have it consumable. This requires full kitting. Full kitting is a checklist that contains all the elements that are necessary. I get this from Goldrat's Goldratt's theory of constraints, it's explicitly discussed a lot in rules of flow. He talks about it in the choice, I believe, as well, but rules of flow, he goes over it in great detail, or his daughter does. This was done after he passed. You don't start work until you verify you've got the full kit. In other words, you've got the ability to get stuff done. You may not know the details, but you have the, if you're going to build something in a month and salespeople aren't going to come on board for 2 months to tell you what they need, then don't start working on it yet. It's like as simple as that. Don't start something before it's ready. This should be part of the definition of ready, which is not a stage gate, except maybe it is. It doesn't let you start something before it's ready. That makes sense to me. I wouldn't call that a stage gate. I would call that just in time. Okay. It's a way of avoiding starting something too early, which is something we don't want to do. Okay. This one I think is pretty clear. Quick means feedback and delivery. Okay. Because this maximizes value over time. If we get it in stages, we build the right thing. It's not speed of working, it's focus, quickness of delivery. This idea of fast is wrong. What if somebody, there's a good book, and actually the book's pretty good, but I hate the title. What was it? Faster, cheaper, more or something, cheaper, faster. It's not see, when you say you're going to go faster, that's not what you do. You going faster is probably going to cause a lot of problems. You deliver quicker and you think of what to do to deliver quicker, but that's not you going faster. I had a real solid experience of this while I built this. I've never built something quite like this with an infographic and adding things on the right. So I was having to use new techniques in PowerPoint to get it done. And since I'm lean, I was doing this last night and today, just in time. That's a joke. But so I'd never quite done this. And I have some cool techniques to do this. Like, how do I get all these slides? Well, part of it is a background slide. So I don't have to, if I changed the order of this so many times, but how many places did I change it? Once. Because that's how I know to do this. So I did all sorts of things and I kept going slow in building to make sure that I was building it as efficiently and effectively as I could. So I wasn't trying to go fast. I was trying to be efficient, and that made me deliver quicker. Okay, you get value and feedback quickly to eliminate delays and thereby wasted work. We want to eliminate waste, but that's like saying win the lottery. Except I don't know how to pick a winning lottery ticket. I do know how to eliminate waste. Delays, delays, delays. Remove them, remove them, remove them. Okay. Small. I love this quote by Ellie Goldratt. Often reducing batch size is all it takes to bring a system back into control. If you're doing iterations or sprints, 2 weeks is as big as you should go and a week is better. 30 days was always big. Now, people forget the origin of the 30 days with Scrum. Because I always thought it was odd until I talked to one of the people on the original Scrum team with Jeff Sutherland. I forget his role. It was Jeff McKenna. I always forget I think he was the Scrum Master. I'm pretty sure, but he might have been the product owner. I think he was the Scrum Master. And he said the reason they did 30 days, and actually, if you go back and read the Scrum papers and stuff, they talk about this. So it was like they would build something and then they do it monthly. And then if the management liked the direction it was going, they would re-up the next month. So you had to justify your product every month. And that's why it was monthly, because it was billed monthly. But shorter is better. Small items can be built in less time. This gives us feedback. This eliminates delays. Visibility. People are going to focus what they're working on. This is called heads down. This going down a rat hole. It's very difficult to get people not to do this. It's easier to set up a system so they don't do this, and creating visibility and focus is a way of doing it. Because if we're not looking at it, we won't get value. So this is a sketch. I forget his name, but he's given me permission to use the slides. Well, I paid him something so I could get that permission, but he wrote the black and all that. And the things here are epics, increments, and MVPs have us look at things, but they don't have us looking at what we can release quickest. You've got to add something, and then people misunderstand. So it's this story about the guy's looking for his lamppost, even though he lost them over there because the light's better here. So my corollary is if you don't have a term for it, We're not talking about it, and therefore we're not seeing it, because this is Edgar Schein's comment. We do not think and talk about what we see. We have to remember this. The lack of a term for QVRs or what a QVR stands for has people not pay attention to what they should be. I want to pause on that. I want that to sink in. I think this is very profound. It's not my profound, it's Schein's profoundness. I'm just saying, here's how it applies. And you see people verbiage about it, but they don't really, it gives you the term that encapsulates it. It aids coordination and the ability to have alignment. And the fact that somebody says, oh, well, I make it all aware to people, well, that person might, but the framework typically doesn't. Avoid waste. I've been saying how almost every one of these avoids waste. The most important value we get, there's like sometimes hear things in the background. Maybe Susan, it might be coming from you though. I don't know. I don't see anybody back there, but maybe just mute. I just have every now and then been hearing some noise background. I'm not quite sure what it is. Or maybe there's somebody else on the line I don't see.
Yeah,
No,
there is a mobile number that joined without muting. I think
okay,
that's
well
what's
here, I can mute. I just muted you, Pete. If you guys can unmute yourself, but that's good.
That was my fault, Al. Sorry.
Oh,
I was
okay.
trying
It's
to.
funny. It didn't show you as muted. It showed you as muted. Okay. Well,
I
mute
figured.
yourself now. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So we want to avoid waste. We want to get quicker feedback. All these things are what we're trying to accomplish. And we need to see this. Common wastes are creating items of lesser value and reworking things. So we want to get rid of all this. Okay. So sequencing. Have you ever noticed when you do a planning session and you got 100 things to do and you ask them, well, how many of these are type A and type B and all that? And they'll say, well, they're all A. Or maybe you go to an enlightened group and they say, well, these are 97 A's and here are 3 B's. And you say, well, we certainly can't do all these. They say, okay, here are 5 B's and 95 A's. Everything's important. Everybody's important is a non-quantifiable term. It's important, but it's hard to compare. You want things in order, this and this and this and this. Now, Don Reinertson suggested weighted shortest job first, which I'm not going to go into. That is a way of doing it. I don't care how you do it, but you need to say that this is the one we want to do first, and this is the next one, and this is the next one, and this is the next one. And when we sequence, we defer putting capacity on less important things. This actually makes it easier if I've got 5 important things I'm working on and a manager wants me to work on a 6, he just thinks, well, you just work a little harder. Any of you ever hear that? Just work a little harder. That's what prioritization gets you. On the other hand, if you sequence them and you're working on the top 3 and he says, oh, here's another one, it's not in the top 3, but work on it. You can talk about, well, when we do this, it slows everything down. I'm taking this and I'm putting in place of everything. And you could actually talk about flow and that you're moving your capacity in a bad place. So sequencing is important also for that reason, but that's another story as well. Comparing items for value requires they also both be the quickest thing releasable. This is another thing that's missing. In other words, you have to have apples to sequence things. See, let's imagine that the value of one item, they're not always homogeneous. So if you've got this big thing and some of it's important and some of it isn't so important, how do you compare that to something else where something is important in it and something's less important? Let me give you an example. So let's say I've got these 2 epics, A and B, okay? And the size is just meant to like how much value there is in it. So, well, if we just go by comparing the epics, we might do B first because it's got more value. But in fact, A might have a lot more value than what B has. So what we really want to do is do this thing first and then this thing. But this thing and this thing give you a different number. Epics are too big to sequence. Features and stories are usually too small to sequence. Now, if you've got a feature you can release, then it's a kind of a QVR, go ahead. This is a reason epics don't work in the PMO. I don't know how many times I've been saying this, at least since 2012. I presented this to Dean Leffingwell. He didn't like it. He said, yeah, you get it. You know how to use it, but it's not what the masses want. And he didn't do it. And he didn't just ignore me. I know 2 or 3 other people better than me at product management. They said kind of the same thing. Questions on this? This is not obvious, but it's also should be reasonably clear. You want to look at that part. You don't want to compare the big A to the big B. You want to compare this to this. And that's what you sequence. That's the quick release.
So would we say we're comparing proportional value?
We're compare proportional value in the sense that the same type of value, high value to high value.
Right.
What's the releasable of A compared to what's releasable of B is a way to say
Got
it.
it.
Yeah, that's nice. I kind of like this. Okay. Alignment. When they're sequenced, people know what's most important. That can create alignment. If everything's important and everybody has a different view of what's important, you won't get alignment. You'll get the, highest paid person in the room. Who can scream the loudest? That's not alignment. Okay, people will align on work
Quick
if they get
question now.
this is just a second. The people will align on work if they understand what's most important. Yeah, Supro.
Yeah, just going back to your previous diagram between A and B,
Yeah.
which you were showing. So are we saying then A has a maximum ability to get released? That's how we are prioritizing?
Yeah, let me say it a different way, because I know this is if I look at say I looked at this, A versus B, what's the value of A versus what's the value of B? I might come up with B. Let's do that first. It's got the most value. Is it clear that could happen? You got to say yes or no, Supro.
Sorry, I was talking to myself on mute.
Oh.
Sorry, please go with your question again.
Yeah, so if there's more value in B, all of B, than all of A, then we'd go with B first. Let's say it was the same amount of time.
Correct.
Okay, but let's say the reality is this. Let's say A has a releasable part of it, and B has a releasable part of it, but the value that's releasable in A is more than the value, this subset. In other words, this is the most important part of A, this is the most important part of B. I can get more value to the customer by doing this part than by doing that part. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, that's a better way to say it. That's what I meant, but I didn't say it clearly.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
So would that be like making mug cakes instead of baking a full cake?
It could
So
be.
you-
Yeah.
so
Now
you
this
sort of-
opens up all sorts of issues I can't get into today, but then it's
Okay.
how do you line A and B and what do you do when you're switching and all that. But that's something that won't happen next week, but it'll happen later, because that's where you can figure this out as well. Okay. Okay. So when there's a conflict, you know what to work on. But otherwise, you got the highest paid person in the room screaming the loudest. Okay, this creates the context for making local decisions. This is very important. How do you make local decisions in the big context of things? It helps you shorten cycle times and getting quick feedback. Now, this comes from the art of action, but it's related to it. As alignment goes up, coordination costs go down. So if we don't have alignment, you've got to spend all this time coordinating things. If you have a lot of alignment, people naturally coordinate around it. You give something that people can relate to. Okay, the less alignment you have, the more coordination is required. The focus must shift to the team, from the team's goals to the organization's goals, and that's stated by sequence, not by prioritization, because prioritization isn't going to happen across the organization. They're going to say, oh, this is all important. And then it doesn't become apples to apples. We've all seen this. Okay, creates context. This is really important. If you've got this objective and then you've got parts of it like features and stories, when you're looking at creating features, ignore any function that's in the feature that's not in the QVR, because it's not part of the original release. So it gives you a way to descope early. Same thing with stories. This makes the feature simpler, but then do the same thing with stories. In other words, I got the QVR, only work on features and that part of the feature that's part of the QVR. Only work on those stories that are in that subset of the feature. You descope a lot of stuff that you don't need for the QVR. Now, of course, you need to have a good quality code so you can add it in later, but that's another issue. Okay, it removes work to do, speeds up feedback, eliminates waits, creates value quicker. Okay, questions? Questions have been good. Getting tight on time, but I think I'm okay. Okay, improved iteration efficiency. This is important. Scrum uses the word sprints. I prefer the generic Agile term. Basically, it's easy to think when you have, say, 2 weeks to get work done that I could just, as long as I get everything done in the 2 weeks, I'm really good. But that loses the opportunity to get something actually done and out the door sooner. So if a QVR can be released in the iteration, completing it first should be the focus, then getting the rest of it should be the focus. So if I've got 2 weeks and I've got a QVR that I think is about half my sprint, I should focus on that for the first week and then do the rest. Okay, we won't talk about flow and all that. There are reasons why maybe I shouldn't even be doing sprints, but I'm not going to worry about that. But let's get the QVR done soon. Otherwise, I've got the QVR and non-QVR stuff taking up the whole sprint, and this increases my capacity. Let's take an example. So let's say I have a QVR here. I've got MVP or QVR, but it should just say QVR. And I've got this feature and this feature as part of the QVR. And I've done these 2 stories. So I've done 2 stories from this feature and nothing from this feature. Now, if I'm looking at getting the QVR done as soon as possible, and I have to decide, do I pick up this story or do I pick up this story? It could seem arbitrary, but not if you're focusing on getting, here's the QVR, focusing on managing WIP, getting this feature. See, if I do this, I get this feature done. If I have multiple QVRs or other things to go later in the sprint, I can ignore them. I'm just focusing on this. So this is how I would do it. If I pick these other things, I should actually expand this to realize stuff in the QVR, to include other things in the iteration that aren't in the QVR. That would make more sense. I'll add that slide. Yeah, that would be a good slide. I sometimes don't see the obvious until I'm actually presenting it. What can I say? Okay, improved PI planning. This is where it's really, really, really useful. So you pre-descope. I know that sounds funny, but if you've ever been in a large big room planning PI event, what happens is everybody comes in with this big wish list. And what happens is then one of 2 things basically happens. Either you get it all in, which doesn't happen that often. Usually it's way more. So now you have to, in the middle of the planning event, you have to decide what stays in, what doesn't stay in. And usually at this point, they define their QVRs or the equivalent of it. But had they come in with QVRs, then they just fill the space with QVRs first. And then whatever you have left goes in. Now, that's another session we had on big room planning, but basically we can push QVRs to the left. In other words, don't plan everything over 3 months. Plan it so the QVRs happen first. I'll show you that in a second. Use objectives to discuss different implementations. You say, if 2 teams are working together and they realize they're having problems, well, maybe there's a better way to do it. So you can talk about that. Involve everybody that's needed to get the value consumed. Okay, and the last one is avoid Parkinson's law. See, this is something that's funny. It doesn't happen a lot, but I've seen it happen. People come in with this bloated requirements list, and amazingly, it all fits in 3 months. Well, they don't debloat it. Why? Because it's all fitting in. But then, of course, they miss their deadline because they don't get the estimates all. So you unbloat it at the front. That's the key thing. Okay. So this is like a board. I've got 8 iterations, say they're a couple of weeks each or something. It's, and these are teams that I have. And the way we planned is we looked at when are your QVRs, the value basically, what are the features? And of course you get all the strings, this related to this and all that. And when you're done with it, you look to see if you can move any of these left. In other words, release them sooner. Any of the green ones left. You also can maybe defer starting things early. Why? Because see, this story here is not needed until I do this one and this one. I started 3 weeks early, 6 weeks before I need to. Well, maybe that's the only time I could squeeze it in, but it also means if something's wrong, people have forgotten what they did. Long cycle times are inefficient. Long cycle times of delivery mean you're delaying value, but they're also less efficient. So you want to shorten cycle times because that reduces waste. Shortening cycle times has the advantage of delivering value quicker and removing by lowering work in process and getting feedback faster. And that all reduces waste, which is another advantage to get it. Okay. So it also improves collaboration because you can see I focus on getting this by increasing alignment. Oh yeah, we want to get that out the door. Also, when you look at the board, people can look at it and say, you know, this one is real important. So can we get it done here? How do we do that? You can have those kind of conversations. Who cares about when this feature can be done or not done? Do you know what I mean? It's like worrying about where your olives in your salad are. Begin with the end in mind. There's no concept like, how can you, I don't even know how you can plan without this concept in there. It's silly. Okay. So these are those 12 things. These are the 12 values. And I wanted to point out they all work to avoid waste. And they also interact with each other. I didn't put in all the interactions. I put in a half a dozen. Then you get the idea. These were the 6 that stuck out to me the most. Probably most everything interacts with most everything else because when you avoid waste, you improve the other things. So they're additional. If you're not doing waste, you're going to improve your planning, etc. So but some things even, clear objectives definitely improves PI planning. So there are things like that.
I'm wondering now if you could redesign this to include the penta in the center with the aspects coming out of the different 5 pieces.
Yeah, this is a good idea, but I'm not sure I would do it that way. But maybe it is a good idea. I was thinking of something else, but so there are 2 ideas here. I'll have to look at it. I could put, in fact, I'm starting to like it more what you're saying, because that would be increased value by design, and that would be the penta. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, sorry. I was thinking of something else. But the more I think about it, I think you're right. I think that's a really good idea. Good. Yeah. I'll have to see that. Bummer. I was pretty sure I was mostly done with this except for a few wrinkles, but that could be another issue as well. No, that's really good, Casey. I really appreciate it. It's really good. Okay. So QVRs, I'm almost done. Kind of, this is almost a summary of it. It really does. It's the essence of agile flow, lean theory constraints, has this delivery. There's nothing inconsistent with any of these things in the QVR. I'm not saying any of these other things are wrong. I've extended agile and I've just integrated these things. And I'm taking advantage of human-centered development because basically I have to create a vernacular because I know people won't hear it if I don't. It's not going to get done. And a lot of promoters tell me when I talk about this, they say, well, it can happen and it can work. And I'm like, I'm more interested in if it does. This is actually how I learned a lot of these things in the 10,000 literally conversations I had with people from around 2005 to 2018. Is I had looked at things like Scrum and Kanban and SAFe, and 90% of what I'd seen, or 70 to 90% of what I'd seen had problems. But then I would run across people who were using Scrum and XP. Well, I like XP, Scrum, Kanban, and SAFe. And they would say, well, we got over this. And I was like, my ears would perk up because I'd say, well, how did you do it? And every time they did something that wasn't in Scrum, SAFe, or these other methods. So then I realized that's the thing that's really working for people. But then they didn't give, some of the times they took credit for it because they knew what they did. And some of the times they just felt, well, that's what SAFe or Scrum is supposed to do. But it's important to realize you have to go beyond it. So I'm interested, not if it can be done, but is the system encouraging you to get it done? Not do you have to overcome it? This is almost that same slide. Basically, I have a different summary. If it's not in our vernacular, it's not in our site. If you don't have a word for it, it's not in your world. Again, the best movie, somebody made a movie to prove all this, by the way. It's a comedy. It's called The Gods Must Be Crazy. And it's just a great movie. I watch it about once a year at least. It's very funny. I think my favorite line is the voice in my head bothering you. When this woman was, she was thinking it's too hectic where she was. This other woman was obviously stressed out too. Okay, so QVRs are the start of Amplio's requirements by objective. Now, I think I've said this to you all before, but maybe not. In the original requirements by objective session we talked about features and stories and MVIs. I guess even by then we had MVI still. And then we expanded it to handle large projects where we have interim steps using MVPs or MVIs. QVRs are the front end of this. So requirements by objectives doesn't start here. It starts here. What's the objective? What's your goal? And then you could break it up. I'm not going to go through this now. I am going to talk about this next week, next Tuesday. Okay. The QVR. Now we've talked about it if you're in the ACE program already, but that was half discovery and half all that. So I'm going to talk about it as part 2 of this. And Casey, I'll probably part 3 will be what you said, how to tie the penton to it. And then there was something else I was thinking that might be part 3. So I might just keep going through this every week. And I'm doing it in the ACOP for a couple of reasons. I want you, the aces here, I want you to know why, and the people who aren't aces, I want you to know why. So the reason I'm doing it for the people who aren't here is part of my commitment is to try to bring this stuff out into the world. So I'm committed to that personally. But there's a reason why I'm doing it for the aces. And you could say, well, why are these people getting it? Nobody said this, and probably nobody's even thinking about it, but my brain's worked, so I think about it. Why am I giving this away free when aces are having to pay? And the reason is this. Well, I just told you why I'm giving it away free, but here's the advantage to you that I'm giving this away. You all need to know how to explain it to people who aren't in the ACE program. That's the whole idea of the ACE program. And when I have to create this for the ACOP, I think about it differently. I think about it in a better way. I still have gaps, like Abizi in his question, where I didn't say anything that I should have had. But believe me, I have fewer gaps. But the other reason is you can see how people are responding to this. That's more important, actually. Okay, so that's why I do this, just to let you know. Okay. So next week, I'm going to talk about requirements by objective. This is really an important piece because I really think this flips the whole thing. Instead of going from stories and features and putting together a system, you come from the objectives. You're integrating design thinking into the whole process. Although I'm not using design thinking, I'm using something I think is better than design thinking, something I learned again from Fernando Flores. So I did not say I came up with something better than design thinking. I did not say that. I learned something better than design thinking 40 years ago, and I'm talking about that. Okay? And it's very consistent with jobs to be done. I don't think I've come close to extending or even up to what Fernando taught me. And that's where that comes from. Okay, so last close, and then we'll go our Q&A. I do want people who aren't in this to know that we have 3 things going on. Well, actually, we have 4. I should have put it up there, but I didn't. There's the Value Coach Workshop, which we just started, and you can join this at any time. I'll help you catch up. We're just 2 sessions into what'll be, I think, 12. I forget if it's 12 or 16, but it just started, basically. The ACE, I'm starting to say this is for people who want to be leaders, not followers. I shouldn't say expert. Nobody's ever an expert. I don't consider myself an expert. I just know a lot of stuff. There's 2 different things. Okay, I do know a lot of stuff. And I don't need, even in the things that people say maybe I'm an expert on, I don't see that. Because then you start having a full teacup, if you think about the Zen metaphor of the full teacup. It's very dangerous, and I've done that more than once. Hell, I've done it more than 2 or 3 times. So there's this program, this learning journey, then the ACOP, which this is open to. And then there's the 4th one, I have started a Amplio Scrum self-study, but now with the Q&A sessions, it's you can actually 3 times a week get 30 minutes of question. I mean, 30 minutes 3 times a week of questions. Questions on the presentation. I'm going to keep it open for 2 minutes. Then I'm going to switch to the follow-up 30-minute question on anything. But you got a minute to think about it. While you're thinking about it, I'm going to go back through the slides and see if I can remember what errors there were. Put that up there. It's kind of a nice. No, it's all good. This is, see, is this, I like this approach. Is this a kind of like this idea of this infographic? So I'm always showing that and then going detail. Was that, I thought that was kind of cool. I've never done this before. Not that it's never been done before. Okay. So here's what we're going to do now. I'm going to get rid of this. We're going to take a 1-minute bio break. By that means if you got to go to the bathroom quick or just stand up and stretch. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stand up and stretch, and then we're going to take questions, or we'll end it if nobody has a question. So I'm just stretching for a minute. Ah. Let's give it another 30 seconds.
Hey, Al.
Yeah.
Hi. Just quickly thinking through the QVR, just trying to get my head around. So
Yeah.
mostly, yeah, just understanding the concept. It's pretty much not even higher at a from a epic to a initiative level, right? That's
Yeah.
how I'm.
Yeah.
That's
I
how I
should
should
have,
be
let
thinking.
me, yeah, it might have been good to have shown. Let me show you this slide. I have a slide that relates the QVRs, and
Yeah.
I probably should have put that in. So that's a great question. Um, hang on, let me I think another thing that might be a good idea to extend this is to put it in the place of a value stream. I've been thinking about changing some of this to do that. Okay, so let's look at strategies in QVRs, and I don't have good animation on this, but let me we can look at the vision, we create our strategies, we can see how to measure success. I'm not endorsing OKRs. I think actually they can be very useful. There's a lot of bias against OKRs, but you need some way of measuring it. OKRs can become just numbers and meaningless, but a lot of companies have used them successfully. You create your initiatives, you have some initiative to, an increment of it. Now you look at what can be done soonest. So this is perfect what your question is. So the QVR is what you get a sequence of these, you decompose it, you decompose features into stories. So I should add something like this into the presentation.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great question. Thank you. Any other questions? It can be about what we did or anything other than politics.
I had one
Well,
that's kind of about politics. Just the new DA stuff, the
Oh,
updated DA browser,
that's
and
that's agile politics. I'm willing to talk about agile politics.
yeah, so the new DA browser and the Miro boards that are available. I don't know if you had a chance to check those out, but
No, the Miro boards don't surprise me that they probably have some good things. I know Joshua Barnes, who's an
yeah,
expert in Miro
yeah, and
boards, has done
they're
stuff.
tied to value stream and stuff like that. They're not quite the direction you're going with
Well, here's the
this.
thing. All of the original brain trust for DA is gone. Okay, and that you had Scott Ambler, you had Mark Lyons, and I wasn't come from DA. There's something there are two things that are very important here to speak of, and I'm happy to talk about this. The first thing is now they have two very smart people there who I know they're paying to extend it. One's a full-time employee, Curtis Hibbs, very smart. He's a good friend of mine. He's very capable. And you have Joshua Barnes, very smart. In fact, I had partnered with him. We're not doing anything active now. Knows Miro boards, collaboration boards better than anybody. I've learned a lot of that from him. He helped me co-build the DAVSC, so he's very familiar with it and things like that. But here's the rub, and these are two important things. DA, what I brought was not DA. I didn't even really know much about DA. In fact, before the PMI gave me an offer, they'd already decided to bring in Scott and Mark. And they didn't say this, but I know looking back on it, they were, gee, I wonder if Al is going to fit in here. That's good question.
But I mean, I think this is just Flex is what we're working off of
That's
here.
right. That's
Okay.
right. So I had built this thing called Flex, Flow Lean for Enterprise Transformation. Now, Flow Flex, which was what I brought into the PMI. Now I brought a whole bunch of other stuff that they actually didn't even want. I had to convince them of it later. I mean, they're still doing technical training because I brought that in. And when they tried not doing it, I made a business case for it, got customers, and they didn't turn down money. So that's why some things are in there that aren't even part of the PMBOK or anything like that. But anyway, what Scott and I talked about, we spent days together at an Agile conference. And what we realized is DA and Flex again, what I brought in, and Amplio is a whole generation beyond Flex now. But DA is not a framework. It's a collection of practices and the browser to figure out what practices you want to use. It's very practice-based, and it has some theory in it, but not a huge amount of theory. It's not based on the theory, but it acknowledges there is theory there. Okay. That said, when I got into arguments with Dave Snowden, within months of being with DA, and they know Dave, Dave asked Scott to shut me up, and Scott said, stop irritating him. And I figured, well, I love Scott, and DA doesn't need the complexity theory I was talking about. So I backed off because why create problems? But it's also an indication of a lack of understanding about the importance of theory and inherent simplicity, which I had in Flex. So Flex is a different philosophy than DA. Flex says that if you look at the principles, and if you look at how it all combines together, and if you have patterns as solutions to recurring problems in a context, that in a context is critical and is left out in the Scrum world's patterns. These are true Alexandrian patterns when you do that. Then you could bring solutions and bring a way to change it. So the DA browser is great, but it doesn't really tell you how to select it. It just gives you the options and you figure it out. Flex tells you how to select it based on those first principles I've talked about. I presented 6 of them here. So that's the difference. Now, what is happening with the PMI and disciplined Agile is, first of all, they're not going to be offering the DAVSC much further. And that was the only part of DA that did this. And they say they're incorporating this stuff into the PMBOK and all that. But basically what it is, it's a retrenchment then from the DA Flex combo to just the DA combo. And they're losing that. And this was something that, I know Scott knows a little bit about it, but he's not working there anymore. I know Mark knows a little bit about it. And I know Curtis and Joshua have it, but they're still just trying to catch up to what I had 3 years ago. Amplio has gone way beyond where I was 3 years ago. I hadn't incorporated human-centered development, hadn't incorporated Toyota, the coaching kata, hadn't fully fleshed out how to do inherent simplicity. So what you have is the moves the PMI have made is definitely an improvement. Bringing in the Agile Alliance is good because they're starting to try to talk to Agile people, and that's a good thing. But they have their box, and their box is not getting, well, it's getting larger, but it's getting larger than just the PMI, but it's not going into this world we're going into with the ACE program. So they're doing good. I mean, I'm glad to see it's improving, but I have no hope they're going to get into where you're coming from, the theory and the patterns. This is taking me years to figure out myself. And I was ahead of them 3 years ago. I'm way beyond where I was 3 years ago. And they're not, the key thing isn't that Joshua or Curtis can't figure it out. The key thing, that's not what they're trying to do. Scott and I, for 2 years, kept saying we have to integrate these two. And he recognized it was important. He recognized the difference. But it never happened. Why? Because we were doing other things that never got on the table. Here's the other thing. The only reason DAVSC happened was because I decided to build it without approval. I mean, I did talk to Scott. It was never in the PMI plan to do the DAVSC. They were doing all this other stuff. I had some time on my hand, plus I work hard. And I said, Scott, this is important. We need to get this done. He said, it's not in plan. I said, okay, but I'm the SME. So they're the ones who are going to build it, but I'm the SME. I'm going to say, I need to actually flesh it out and create a prototype for me to understand what it is, and then they could build it when it gets in plan. So he said, yeah, go ahead and do that. That ruffled some feathers, by the way. So I built it, and then it's kind of hard to turn down this amazing course that's already been built. So they said, well, we'll polish it up for you. And that's what happened. So they've never had their heart in this, ever. Not even when I was there. Okay, sorry, that might have been a little bit of a rant, but I think it addresses your issue. Other questions? Politics in Agile is okay. Politics in the United States, not okay. That's what I meant by no politics. You did not want me to go on a rant, trust me. But I will say this, anybody who's not in the United States, I'll apologize for my country. So you know where I'm standing with it, even if I won't talk about it beyond that.
But how is the PMI? They look like they are canceling the entire disciplined agile certifications to the public.
Oh, they're doing all the workshops, not just, they're canceling all the workshops, not just the DAVSC. Well, that's a shame.
Exactly.
They're
Exactly.
gonna
Because
replace them with two courses. One's a team foundations course, and then one's a leadership course.
Yeah, I've been meaning to promote more and more that if you're interested in DA, come to this, because this is so much better than DA. And DA was great. I mean, I did not join the PMI with DA thinking I would fix DA. No, there's lots of good stuff in there. Lots of good stuff. And just taking the browser and having a leadership or whatever, it's well, look, I'll say one other thing to explain how they don't see vision sometimes. So pre-COVID, I showed up and I'd already been doing training like this, remote overtime training. And I told them this is what I wanted to do. There was zero interest in it. Zero. Imagine if the PMI had created how to do these workshops overtime like this before COVID struck. Not interested. They're not visionary. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It's the only confusing part about it, and my question was less about like the politics. I was kind of joking. I was
Yeah, I know.
more about just
There
the
is politics.
compatibility. But
Yeah.
the other part of it is, so the way it was positioned when they were selling me on DAC and Value Stream is that was the end of the Agile journey, and now they're putting the ACP as at the forefront and saying this is the only globally ISO accredited Agile certification that we offer.
Yeah.
So that's a little frustrating, but oh well, right?
Well, it's an organization that has not learned how to walk their talk. And I can appreciate that. It's very confronting for an organization to do that. And I've been there. I've talked to people about how I was a horrible manager and not a good coach, but I was not a good manager for years. Now I could get away with that when I owned the company or was a major interest in the company. And I did get away with it. And I never got any complaints. Why? Because I was the boss. And you just say, oh, asshole Al, I understand. I understood that. But it wasn't my top priority until I formed that objectives. And then I realized if I'm teaching lean management and I'm not doing lean management, something wrong with that. Then it's just a good idea. Then it's do what I say, not what I do. And I realized that. Now, that didn't make me a good manager right away, but if this was lean management and I was here, then every year I'd learn a little bit more. And however much I learned about lean management, I'd do 2 or 3 times that. And after about 3 or 4 years, I actually overshot, if anything. I was too not telling people what to do. This idea that management has to let go and not interfere is so wrong. I had a certified Scrum trainer that I was, who was building something for me. We had a project and we're going to build it in stages and we're going to check it all out. And I said, well, this guy's a CST. He should know Agile. And I'm just going to let him go off and run and get it done. And $100,000 later, I realized he'd taken something completely wrong, wasn't doing Agile at all. I don't know what he was doing. And then I realized, Al, you're giving too much license to people. This was around, I don't know, 2008 or 9 or so. And then I realized you do have to appreciate they know more than you, hopefully, but maybe they don't. So you don't tell them what to do, but this is where lean management is so useful. And I almost never see this anywhere. I mean, shouldn't say that. I don't see it in the Agile space with frameworks. Lean management is about learning and creating the environment for people to excel in. And if they're doing it inconsistent with lean principles, you have to question them on it. And then you have 2 choices. You can either beat them over the head with the principles, and believe me, in lean, they do that sometimes. Or you don't do it as a manager, you bring in a sensei and let him do it. Okay. And I've seen that. I've seen case studies where the sensei came in and man, you thought this guy was going to go apocalyptic on you. Because that's what they determined. That's what the sensei thought. These guys need a massive shift. And I'm going to yell and scream and berate them and all sorts of stuff. And then I'm away and they can say bad things about me, but their managers will look really nice compared to me and I'll have shown them what they need to do. I've seen senseis take that approach and it works in some cases. I did not say to do that. Some cases, you know, that kakaku, it's called the quick, big fix. In some cases, you got to be gentle and just push. This is what I mean when I say Agile ignores this. You got to look at the people. You got to look at the culture. Do they need a wake-up call? Because we're going out of business in a year and it's not a choice anymore what you have to do. Or are we going to incrementally learn? See, I love incremental learning. I was going to say, oh man, do you learn a lot in a short period of time or do you learn a little over a long period frequently? I like that latter one. I have a lot of faith in that. It's funny, I garden. I actually wrote a post about it. But this morning I was just walking around. I take breaks sometimes going out in my garden. I always find some little thing to do. And I work on my garden 15 minutes, 30 minutes a day on average. That's not a lot. It's a couple hours a week. But it's amazing what the place looks like. And part of it is because it's just a little nudge here, a little nudge here, a little nudge here. And I do it when it's fun. I do it when I need it. And those little nudges are really good. And I know how I used to be when I do these big projects, but then what would happen? I'd get so tired and all the rest of the stuff goes to crap. And let me tell you, the reason I know it's a good garden, because my kids notice. When your adult children compliment you on your work, you've made a difference. Okay, other questions? Anything? Yeah, just whoever wants to go. I saw Daniel, did you have a question? I saw you get off mute first, and then Tony had a question. I can't hear you though, Daniel, if you're talking. Well, if you do, raise your hand or go on video. But otherwise, Tony, why don't you go ahead while Daniel's figuring out what's going on?
All right, I'll be brief. It's not a question necessarily, but it is an observation. And if you have anything to add to it,
Sure.
like a correction, I'm up for that. And it has to do with the QVRs.
Yeah.
What we were just talking, you were just talking about QVRs. I had this thought fly through my mind that if you implement those, there's a secondary effect, which is very simply that you what's the term? You promote or you build or grow a sense of goodwill among customers, whoever those are. I guess we could say stakeholders.
Yeah.
maybe some more than others, but that's not an insignificant thing whenever you can do
No,
that
that's
in an
nice.
organization.
That's very nice, Tony.
That's all.
No, what you're doing is, and I could do a diagram on this too. What we're doing is we're increasing collaboration. It's almost like you need another outer ring here of all the stakeholders you're collaborating with, and collaboration is what builds trust. People tend to get building trust backwards. You don't build trust just by working together. You build trust by keeping agreements and talking to each other. And trust is a result of things. You don't, oh, I'll trust you. Well, if you've got people that aren't capable and you're trusting them to be capable, that's not a good thing. Yeah. Okay. Daniel, you ready now? I see you've put your video on. Then Supro, you can go after Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I told you I was driving, so I think my headphone is not working. But anyway,
Okay.
I'm running the computer. It was just going back to the objective outcome scope thing. I was thinking in my case, and first I thought that the outcome changed, but then I realized that actually the scope changed. So from my point of view, I took so much advantage from the last conversation about that, and now I can clearly see that my objective remains the same, my outcome as well. So the change of scope will be the thing I will have to deal with.
Yes. Yes. That's a very powerful insight because that happens. And what we want to make sure we're being clear of is that this will happen and we have more certainty about this and less about this. So when this changes, it's not a problem because that's where we were headed in the first place. Yeah, that's good. That might be a good kind of template to check when something changes, which is it? It's worth looking at that and trying to see. Okay, good. Yeah, I can see you've been grappling with that whole penta thing, and that's good. See, this is why little bits over time is so important. Changing perspective is very unlikely to happen quickly. It doesn't have, I've never seen it happen. I won't say I've never seen it happen quickly, but it's most something happens a 2-degree shift, a 3-degree shift, a 4-degree shift, and then it happens. Okay, it's not like in Sergeant York where this lightning bolt comes down, hits the tree, and he gets God in a flash. It doesn't usually happen that way. Not that it never does. Okay, was there anything else, Daniel? Or you're just saying that's how you're putting it together?
And related to the second thing we were talking today, I realized that actually the problem was the lack of communication with a constrained stakeholder, because somebody else could have warned us before, like 1 month ago, what would happen, but we didn't do that contact with the stakeholder. So thank you very much for that as well.
Yeah, this is why I have this up here, because this would be a good template to have as well. Okay, so there was Supro, I think you were next, and then Abizi, you're after him.
Al, my question got answered, so
Okay,
yeah, I'm
great.
good. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. Abizi, did you have a question? Which would be good because I do have a hard stop today at 3:30. But I got 5
Yeah,
minutes.
so it's actually, yeah, it's same with what Daniel was saying.
Okay.
It's exploring the objective even more and understanding how do you get to know the objective. Yeah, is that you have to engage the critical stakeholders, or is there a document? I know the PMI talks about a business case that captures the objective. Is that also in line with what we are talking about?
Not the way the PMI does it, but yes. And I'm talking about that next Tuesday.
Okay.
Because the thing about the requirements by objectives that's so important is that in describing it, it actually illustrates how you do it. Okay. And we did have a talk on it, but it was a working talk, and it was, then half of it is good and half of it gets changed. So next week, I'm actually going to tie all these pieces together in basically an hour like this. So you'll see it then. And in fact, what I want to do as well is I'm going to come up with a template. We had a template in the requirements by objective already, but it wasn't expanded from front to back. And I'll make sure I have that for next week.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Yeah,
Hey,
you'd have,
Al, is there any plan to add like a change management workshop to Amplimo? I know the closest
uh,
thing to it is Jason Little's lean change, but
I have it
I see
integrated
this as
into, I have that integrated into the diagnostic and how to do planning. And I don't call it change management, but that's basically built into that.
well, maybe you could sell it as change management because there's not a whole lot out there that's good in change management.
Probably, this is actually a pretty good idea. I've just, to me, it's an integrated part of Amplio, but
There's AdCar, and AdCar is sort of the antithesis of what we're talking about here. So I
yeah.
just thought, yeah,
Okay, well,
minimum
good.
viable
Thanks for
change.
bringing that up. I should definitely consider that because it is that, but it's done in a much more intelligent way. Um, because it doesn't have a way to do it. It's got a variety of ways how to decide things. Yeah, that's a good idea. We actually have talked about all this in the in the but
Transition management.
yeah, in this whole method of the way we talk about.
Yeah, it's already in there. You just have to
Yeah,
frame it
I,
and
I
sell it
should
as
frame it
that.
that way. Yeah, okay. Okay, all good. Okay, well, I'm going to close this now. And tomorrow, I forget what we're supposed to be doing. Um, but oh, in fact, I was thinking I might want to change it. Let me take 1 minute to look just so I can. This was the schedule because I'll tell you what I think we were planning to do tomorrow in the ACES program was requirements by objectives, but I don't think I need to do that because I think I can get this done here. I think I've gotten further along than I thought. So I'll figure out what I want to do tomorrow, or if you guys have a hot request, send me an email and then I'll let you know tonight what we'll do tomorrow. But I don't think I'll do this because I think I've gone a lot further. I don't need another session on it and I could do it here. Okay. Anyway, thanks for being in the queue. And I love this new format myself. It's the 3 sessions, an hour and then a half an hour. Makes a lot more interactive. So talk to y'all later.
Thanks.
Thank you, Al.
Great. Thank you.